Hi, and welcome to this episode of Concise Conversations. As always, I like to get out and about to record these intros because it gives me a chance to spend a bit of time with my good friend and producer Jamie. Hi Jamie.
Hello.
On today's episode we're going to be speaking to Simon Hörauf. Simon is the managing director of a design agency called Moodley. Now, it's got offices throughout the world with the main offices in Graz, Austria. But Simon is the managing director of the Munich offices. So we talked to Simon about the design process and how he got into it, which is quite interesting because he's got a background in carpentry, and we talk about how whatever you're designing, basically the core principles are the same, whether it's a chair or a massive digital website. We also talked to him about how easy it is to integrate innovative thinking into existing companies that have got legacy applications that need a fresh new angle with new technology. And then, obviously, we get to know Simon a little bit better with the Concise Conversations first 8 questions.
Concise Conversations is brought to you by Concise Software, one of Europe's leading software development agencies, with over 10 years of experience in web, mobile, and emerging technologies. So contact us to see how we can assist in ongoing work or help bring new projects to life.
Hi Simon, thanks for joining us today on Concise Conversations. It's great to get an opportunity to speak to you.
Hi Robert. Well, thanks for having me. It's great.
So I just thought we'd take the time today to just chat a little bit about yourself, Moodley, how you got there, what you do there, what Moodley does, and then how you see things evolving in the future. So I guess first things first, could you tell us a little bit about Moodley?
Yeah, sure. So Moodley is a design business, started in 1999 in Graz, which is the second biggest city in Austria. It doesn't make it very big. So I think it's, 400,000, 300,000 people or something like this.
But Vienna's quite big.
Yeah, Vienna is not 100%.
Second biggest German-speaking city in the world, I think.
Is it really? You know your facts. Very good. Yeah, I think Vienna is probably 2 million thereabouts or so. Yeah. And but Austria doesn't have that many cities, so to say, and Graz is the second biggest, so it's
that's good.
It's still a proper little city, and it's very nice actually. It's that sweet spot in between big city, and it's big enough to have all the comforts and everything and variety, but it's still small town-ish. Anyway, they started 20 odd years ago or so there, and the company was started really more as a design studio with focus on graphics for mainly brand design work, and have over the last 20 or so years, I suppose, developed with the market, with what clients need, and have, especially over the last 5 years approximately, broadened the portfolio of services that Moodley offers quite significantly beyond graphic-based design for brands. It's still at the core of what we do. So we're now essentially a sort of group of small businesses, if you like. There's just over 100 people in the whole company.
That's good.
Spread mainly across offices in Graz, Vienna, and Munich. We have a number of partnerships, but they don't count into the 100 odd people at the moment because they're sort of structurally and organizationally a little bit different. But we have partnerships with other similar businesses in the States, in Turkey, in Istanbul, and in China. So it's a really interesting business in that way that it's sort of taken what clients need from a design business, if you like, and they've really taken that into their growth strategy. So over the last 5 or so years, they have strategically added several services that I guess just resonate with clients, such as what we do here in Munich, more strategic consulting around digital product or service development, but also things like industrial design. We have an industrial design unit, and we have a development team as well. We have a consulting team that really works more on the, I guess, strategic support for our clients across all of these areas, and really try to offer our clients essentially design services from, trying to figure out what the strategic framework is in which they might be developing, new brands, new products, new services, to then actually implementing those as well.
Wow, that's great. It's a good broad spectrum of services that you're offering. So you founded Moodley. Were you one of the founders of Moodley?
No. I joined as the managing partner for the Munich office. So I'm a partner in the business, and I run the Munich office, and basically started the Munich office 2 years ago.
Ah, right.
Yeah.
Great. So how did you get yourself into the sort of design industry?
I come from a design background professionally. If we go all the way back, I started as a carpenter.
Well, that was something I did want to talk about.
Okay.
You told me this last time we spoke, so quite interesting to see how you went from that sort of because they are obviously very similar disciplines, like creating, so it's just interesting to see how you went from one to the other.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. They're sort of culturally, we often see the trades, and I know especially in Anglo-Saxon countries, that's often the case, that you think, tradies are on a different planet to all those people who have gone to university and so on. And, so culturally they're really in different buckets, so to say. But the processes that are essentially turning the wheels in, whether you're building tables and chairs or you're building digital products, then often there's a lot of similarities, let's say. So anyway, but I didn't just go from being a carpenter to going let's just do something digital. That wasn't quite as fast.
Right.
So, but I basically did an apprenticeship as a carpenter, mainly furniture. So maybe a little bit on the finer side of carpentry. We didn't do sort of big rough construction stuff that much, and I really enjoyed it. But especially back then, there was a real sort of glass ceiling as to what you could do in that trade, and it was also bloody hard work, I have to say, physically
right.
as well. And I thought maybe there's a little bit more to my professional life, and then went to the UK and studied product design. So this was in the late 90s, and essentially from product design, I worked as a product designer. Then afterwards, moved to Australia, and then after a few years, I started my own business with two partners and best friends, and we tried to do, what essentially sort of was a little bit like what now design thinking is. So using design methodology to solve problems that are not traditionally design problems, maybe more business problems or culture problems in an organization or things like this. Unfortunately, we weren't smart enough to call it design thinking, so it was really difficult because we always had to tell a story of a half an hour before we could actually say what we can do for you, dear client. So it wasn't, it was a little bit challenging. We didn't quite have the sort of big picture view at the mature age of 24 or something. Anyway, but we ended up essentially founding a business that did a lot of design work, a lot of communication work, and we didn't really, we tried purposefully not to fit into the existing categories of design agency or marketing business or consulting business. We tried to sort of merge a lot of these things, and I suppose that's how then step by step I ended up doing a fair amount of, or we as a company ended up doing a fair amount of digital work, just because if you think about building products and services, working in communication, clearly in the early 2000s or so you would be doing something digital, and then found my way into more digital. And I suppose now I'm probably more of a jack of all trades along the lines of product service development, and related subjects, if you want. And that works obviously quite well in the Moodley context because we have quite a broad spectrum, and have then the ability to focus our teams or sort of segments of teams on the specific challenge at hand, be that more of a, expressing the brand at a particular touch point, or turning that into a physical or a digital product.
Yeah, because I mean, like as that side of things evolved, and you were there as it was all evolving, moving from like the internet and the web being something that people were like, how do we bring this into the business that we're doing, shifting right the way to the other side of it, starting off, most businesses start off as like, we're starting as mobile and web, how do the other things filter into that? Did you see that transition happen throughout your career?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we were in Australia at the time, as I said, when we started our business, and Australia hasn't. I think it's changing now as we're becoming more of a digital economy. But traditionally, Australia is more of a marketing-based market. So there's a lot of global products that have not been developed in Australia. They're not being made in Australia, or maybe parts of them being made in Australia, but they're being sold in Australia. So from our side, a lot of it started really from that communication-based need, and I think maybe that was also the case elsewhere. The internet's use, I suppose, for the general public initially was a lot of communication only. No real services were exchanged digitally, and that's obviously changed and is also merging now. I think really interestingly that these days, with concepts like edutainment, and you can sort of talk to your friends on social media, but you can also then just tap the other picture and you buying something, so you sort of merging what traditionally were separate activities, and they're all kind of get lumped together somehow in a weird way. So that is certainly something that I guess through the last 20 years we've seen, and maybe in my initial business in Australia, we tried to understand, and now with Moodley we hope we understood at least a little bit more than 10 years ago, and we try to lead our clients in that in this type of a world as well.
Yeah. So when you start working with a client, how does that like communication process work in terms of trying to understand their needs, and do you find that sometimes they don't really understand their own needs, they're looking to you to try and give them an idea of what their needs might be?
I think usually they're quite clear about what the pains are. So, the pains may not make it all that clear what the actual task at hand is. It's I suppose, like, I don't know, you go to the physio and you say your hip hurts, but then actually the physio tells you you're wearing the wrong shoes or something like this. That's it's a little bit similar in organizations, I guess, that they have a product that doesn't sell as well as it used to, or, they are going into a new market and they've done this before, but somehow the rules have changed and they don't really know how that should work, but they keep trying and it just doesn't work, or whatever it might be. It's usually when there's noticeable pain that we start the conversation. But you're right, more often than not, it takes a fair amount of digging and listening, really, and spending time with those people to figure out what is the relationship between the pain you're experiencing and the actual root cause, and then what is our job, probably somewhere in between, or a combination, that's it's an interesting process. I quite enjoy that part.
That sounds like one of the most exciting parts of it is like really understanding what the clients want and need, and then driving that forward based on them, because they're going to come to you because they're missing something internally. So it's that part of it is when you're working with someone where you're like we need something but we don't exactly know what it is. That's why we've come to you. Please help us discover that. I think that discovery process seems like one of the most rewarding bits of the industry.
Absolutely, that's right, because it is, I suppose, we're design business, even if sometimes our deliverable to the client is, when you look at it, you might not say, oh yeah, that's design, but there are, sometimes they are, I guess, models or processes that are designed. Sometimes they are kind of pretty things, surfaces and so on, that are designed. But to that process, as you said, to kind of figure out what it is that needs to be designed in order to solve the real problem, is often quite quite tricky. And I suppose you also need, on the client side, you need someone who's willing to, to have those conversations, and or who has done the thinking before and come. That does happen as well, that they come to us and they're already quite clear. But yeah, more often than not, it's not that clear.
And like one interesting element of it for me is how do you deal with compartmentalizing certain aspects of the business, because like some people might think that branding and user experience are different things, but how much do you think that they're integral, or how much they melt together? And is that something that you've got an opinion on?
I mean, it is. I don't think there's a sort of a recipe to it, because it depends on what kind of brand you are as an organization and what sort of relationships you have with your customers, or influencers of some kind of your proposition to the market. Depends on your product, how it's being sold, how people engage with it. But I think generally speaking, considering we live more and more in a digital world, as you and I, we have a good conversation digitally somehow. And as we all know, the same applies to practically everything, right? Like my kid's going to school, my daughter is sick this morning. What do? I use a digital platform to tell the school my daughter is sick today and she won't be coming in, and so on and so forth. So, I think everything that a brand does practically has a digital element, and when it has a digital element, it's an expression of the brand to some degree. And I think that is sort of, I think you can't separate the two. And then sometimes the way one influences the other is a little more obvious than in other situations. If you have a pure digital brand, like say Uber, every touch point until you actually receive the service is pure digital, and it always has been. There is no legacy. We've never known an Uber shop or something like this. So, for them, it's obviously a lot more obvious, and Uber has been, I guess, well positioned with starting with user experience first up, and supporting their business model essentially, and their success. And for many other brands, that it's not as obvious. It's not as easy to figure out. Okay, we as a brand are this, or have been to this day this, and now we have to take all of this complicated, thing that is a brand. That's quite big and often sort of soft and fuzzy and hard to really figure out. And now we have to take all of this into user experience, user interfaces, digital services, and get it past data security and, high expectations of consumers who are used to the sort of level of user experience finesse that an Uber or a PayPal has or so. And I guess that's often where this I think really obvious connection between a brand and how digital touchpoints work, how that breaks, because then they are often driven by purely technical requirements and technical solutions. Because for a lot of companies or a lot of organizations, if they are new to this challenge, the technical aspect of it is sort of just overshadows everything, and all the resources go there. Where in reality, it's essentially just like everything else that a brand does. I think it's like, I don't know, TV used to be new, right? So they were specialists for TV, and now it's if you think about how it all works, everybody understands TV, and we understand it's a mainstream media channel, and we know more or less about how it works, and that's right.
Died,
exactly.
And podcasts have taken.
But it's like I used to work a bit more in Australia in a media context, and it was really interesting in the sort of early 2005, 2006. Everybody had suddenly digital teams, and they were totally different to all the other teams. And I guess what we have more and more, and the same in internally on the client side as well, and agencies as well, they're all like digital specialists and digital teams. And now I suppose what you need is you just need people who understand brand, and of course brands also live in a digital world. So you need to understand how does a brand come to life in a digital world where the logo has to work on 20 by 20 pixels, for example, on a moving screen.
it's difficult as well because it's almost like the MVP product, the minimum viable product, has pushed on, hasn't it? It's like, whereas in the past, all these online companies could like make their mistakes and expectations are quite low. Now, if you're a legacy business moving into the digital space, the expectations of how you start are a lot higher. So it's a bit more difficult to, you've got, like you said, you've got to get the technical solution, and that's one thing. But on top of that, the customer expectation now is a lot slicker in terms of the brand and the digital design. So I just wanted to touch upon the sort of the way that you keep the like creative culture in Moodley going, because I know that's something that you've spoken about in the past. And how does that, because how does it work to keep a team creative? And I think you said that comes through culture, and I just wondered if you could touch on that for a bit.
Yeah, it's a tricky question, I think. One thing is probably, because it's also, a lot of it relates to your clients and how because we are a service provider, right? So if no one buys our service, we wouldn't exist. So, most things are driven by how we relate to our clients, how we work with them, how they appreciate what we do. And I suppose those things, they really drive the way we perceive the core of what we do, which is to a large extent creative work. And I think a big part of that is actually articulating the value to our clients of design, and to make that something that the team can experience as well. Often that is as simple as enabling conversations between our team and the client's team, and not just on we need something urgently from you. You guys talk to each other. That does happen, of course, but also beyond this, and actually build real relationships so that our teams become, to some extent, a part of the client's team, and they feel a certain sense of appreciation and value in what they do. And I think that's sort of at the core of it. And when you can foster these types of relationships and articulate both through our clients but also internally, and in a way, celebrate the actual value that we create with our creative work, I think that's probably the main part, because it is often really difficult to grasp, what is the value of creativity, and how is it different from, let's say in our company, designing or sketching some really stylish looking physical products, or fine-tuning the design of component 472B in a digital design system. They both require a sense of creativity, and they both require energy and motivation. But how do they relate to each other, and what's so good about one or the other, and what is the real value? That we try to make that part of everyday discussions, and to really articulate that and make that understood for everyone. So we try to connect everyone in our teams to the business aspect of what we do as well. It's not always easy. I certainly think it doesn't always work 100%, but we at least make that part of everyday life, essentially, and not just sort of at the end of the month we see one quote from the client, but we ideally like to be a little bit more in touch with that. And that means that people feel happy and proud about what they do, and usually that is sort of that builds momentum. And I guess if you can repeat this and make it, as I say, part of everyday life, so it happens more often and frequently, even on a very sort of light touch kind of way, then that creates culture ultimately, I think. And so we celebrate design and the value of design as much as we can.
So we're going to, at the end of this, we're going to show your book at the end of the podcast. If anyone stays tuned and looks at that, we're going to do that. So I just wonder if there's any interesting things you've been working on or worked on recently that you think might be interesting to talk about.
There are. I think
there's
a whole ton of interesting things. Some of them are interesting because of the details. Maybe one thing I can talk about is we're working with a medical technology company at the moment that works in the field of mental health, and they develop their own products, hardware products. They have a number of software products. They have they run their own clinics in, I think, currently 5 markets around the world, so it's a really interesting, exciting, quite complex business. Having their own clinics, physical products, software or digital products. They have their own clinic staff, but then they also train clinic staff in other clinics that use their software or hardware, and that's one client I could talk about that's really exciting, because the subject matter is super interesting. It's essentially sort of therapies in for mental health that require or that use very recent developments in technology, and it's exciting to be part of that because there's a huge jump in this field, and that's exciting to be part of. But what's also from our perspective is really exciting is that they need practically our entire team. So we work across business strategy. We currently designed one of their software products, so that all the interfaces, the user experience, etc. The brand has been revamped across all aspects. There's a big internal part of this, really taking all of the employees and also future employees onto this journey of what this brand really stands for and what that means for their work, for how they collaborate, etc. We also design currently 2 of their physical products. So that's quite rare that we have clients who touch on all of these areas, and it makes. I mean, obviously, it's nice for a business to have a client who needs a lot of your services. That's nice. But what I mean by what I find exciting is more that we can bring a lot of value to that business, because they have one team that understands what they do from the overall business strategy side down to individual products, and how that relates to their teams, and we can support them essentially as a very small and impactful team, where otherwise they would probably need 2 or 3 different service providers, and they're sort of going through a ramp-up phase, so they're very short on time and resources internally. So it's that's wonderful to see how we can give them pretty much exactly what they need, and also what the impact then is on their side, that they have their hands free to do other things that they need to be doing. So that's one.
That sounds good as well, because you're not the end user of that is getting a real beneficial service that's above and beyond what you just normally get from in the consumer industry, and that changes the stakes a little bit, but also makes it seem a little bit more fulfilling, I guess, when and especially with new technology, that you're taking something and you're adding real value, not just through the technology, but the way that people with special needs
one of
are
those
interacting
areas
with
that
those
often
technologies.
is, let's say, a bit under-designed, because in the medical field, the requirement for certification, obviously, especially in Germany where we like rules so much, the requirements for certification are so high that in order to produce a new service or a new product, a company has to invest so much into just the kind of legal requirements that often there may just not be a lot of time or budget left for better user experience design or something like this, because hey, it kind of works and we got the certification, let's just bring it into the market. Right? That's sort of what happens a lot of the time. But especially in health, I would say, making things more usable, more easier to use, less mistakes, quicker, essentially usually means better outcomes. And if we're talking about health, that's kind of what we all want, right? So it's very nice to be able to contribute to that and essentially not just create a nice product that's maybe nice, but this is a product that has real impact. Not just product, but I suppose the whole ecosystem has significant impact at the end of the day. It's good.
What do you find to be sort of like the exciting technologies coming up that you're looking forward to working with? You had any sort of like experience working with sort of like augmented realities or virtual reality?
No, I mean, we have toyed around with virtual reality for prototyping, for complex experiences. And I think that's certainly a really good environment, especially maybe in an environment where you have to mix physical environments with digital environments. And you can, prototyping digital is relatively easy. Prototyping physical, not so easy. You can't just build, Nike, they built concept stores just to try it out and so on, but not every organization is able to make these investments in their product or service development. But so I think that's quite exciting to be able to maybe sort of mimic physical environments like that. I think that's really exciting. I think probably more impact more immediately to us would be just better tools in everyday life. To be honest, what happened to all of us, what you and I are doing, I think, the way we now all communicate, I think, pretty much, just a year ago, I remember we were still in a phase where most of our clients had gone into sort of this rabbit in the headlights situation. Everybody seemed to be in this situation where they've gone like, what the hell are we going to do now? We don't know. Does anyone know? No. So, correct. So, I remember having calls with clients who were not set up for home office at all. With small children in the background and balls being thrown at the camera, and not like large. I had larger meetings with people who. They just didn't know how to behave in, especially maybe from an older generation. They just didn't know how to behave in a video call. Some really basic things. But you multiply this in an organization. Some of these organizations that have hundreds of thousands of staff. That's a problem. If it sounds easy, but it's a problem. If people can't communicate properly, they don't know how they work together, and not just the video call bit, but also then. How do we share information? How do we collaborate better? How do we, work in one tool as opposed to you in one and me in another, and then I'll email you the latest version. And so I think in terms of collaboration tools and transparency in how we actually collaborate in teams, how we minimize, the sort of noise that is usually part of these processes. I think that is probably what I'm most excited about. So like Miro, the sort of whiteboard thing. I know there's a few other ones. I know Figma has launched like a beta version of their, I think it's called FigJam, which is similar. And that's, I think, changed so many processes so quickly and quite fundamentally. I have to say I'm probably more excited about those kind of smaller steps, but that are happening across a lot of breadth. So everyone suddenly makes this small step, and that gets all of us kind of a lot further, I think.
Yeah. So have you? When you're working with other companies, I know people will come to you, and you've got a broad range of skill sets. But do you ever find that you need to outsource some services that you don't have in-house, and then how do you find that process of working with those companies?
Yeah, it happens definitely. It's quite. I think in our industry it's very common. We have almost across all the services. It happens in some areas more than others. I think it's something that I particularly like about Moodley as a company as well. We value, which I think is just essentially driven by the founders and the people that the founders first employed, some of which are still in the company, and what they all share, I think, is a real appreciation of relationships. So our procurement process usually involves having lunch or maybe several meals together, and building trust first and foremost. Obviously, we have other parts of our procurement process when we work with partners, but a really, really important part is the kind of human aspect, the trust factor, the like factor. Do you like these people? Do you want to spend every day working with them? It's pretty important.
Well, that's an interesting perspective. That comes at the heart of how you choose the partners that you work with.
I don't know. I mean, I think that the one thing that resonates maybe with a lot of our clients and also our staff quite often when we talk about, maybe a little more freely, like on a Friday evening or something, or with a client, if you have lunch, I think is this, what I mentioned earlier, how in media everyone had digital teams 10 years ago or 15 years ago, and then they somehow fizzled out because everyone realized actually we don't need digital teams, we just need communication teams, and they just need to know how to communicate digitally. That is just how it works.
Right.
It's become part of the, vernacular of any brand in any situation in any industry, and I think that's a really interesting development that companies are in at the moment. I think where it seems to me like a little bit of a step change, where maybe it's because everyone has a sense of maturity, where every company has by now developed a digital service or a digital product by themselves. They have maybe gone through one cycle of digital innovation of some kind, or they have done, maybe if some of our industrial clients, for example, they might have worked more on digitizing processes, for example. That's more their focus probably. But almost every company above a certain size out there has in the last 10 years kind of done one cycle of digital development of something. And and some have, in Germany it's very popular to have innovation hubs. They build an innovation hub, possibly in Berlin, to get all the trendy people and the cool people, and get all the disruption happening. And I think there's good reasons, and I'm sure there are many good things that have come out of this. But what we see with many of our clients is that they have now gone through this cycle once or twice or whatever. And they've taken their learnings, and there's this kind of reshuffle of what should be our priorities. What should we have this innovation hub, or should we actually somehow bring innovation back to our headquarters? Or if at one point we want to do this, if it's all the way in Kreuzberg in Berlin, it's going to be really difficult to bring it into our little regional headquarter somewhere. And the same goes for other processes or models in sort of digital value chain. And I think a lot of clients are now in this position where they rethink this, and they are going through almost like the next phase of how do they actually relate to digital value generation of whatever it is that they do. It's obviously different from industry to industry. And I think that will really change the way design, but also everybody else out there that's part of this process, the sort of big four type consulting firms, the design firms, the development firms, the specialists that you need along the way, how we bring value to our clients and how we actually engage with them as well. We can see this now, in Munich where we are, big organizations now employ hordes of designers because they realize that having the cool design company in Berlin is good in some ways, but it's also really difficult because they don't understand the culture of the headquarters. They can't communicate. There's sort of gaps everywhere, and that's something that I just find is really interesting. That's happening, and that's going to be interesting to watch to see what happens next for companies.
I think it's an exciting concept, isn't it? It's like I think the high level things. They've been through those like exciting design processes, but now it's almost like the everyday basics of how businesses interact on a day-to-day level need some sort of design polish around them, which obviously you can't do as like you said in a design agency in Kreuzberg. You can't do you can't sit in that office and go like, well, how do you interact with the people in the payroll department, or how do you interact with people in the logistics department? Some sort of design sexiness needs to be brought into that to just make that flow better and work better and be more efficient.
That's right, but without the Kreuzberg attitude, because the guys in the payroll department in Gütersloh, or I don't know what the equivalent would be in the UK, but
Barnsley.
That's right. The accounts team in Barnsley. You got to be able to relate to them, and you have to actually be able to also get their trust to some degree. Now, if you're going to build a digital process for the accounts department, well, you have a relationship with them. You need to integrate somehow as a team. And I think that changes things a lot. I quite like it because it goes back to where we started. It's about really understanding where are the pains and what is the thing that needs to be solved, instead of just saying, well, it's got to look really sexy. It's got to be, super hot design. That's not always the solution. And to understand this and then, really build the right thing at the end of the day. That's it's quite exciting. And as we all become, and organizations become more digital, it does mean that everything needs to be designed, right? Because everything that ends up on a screen somewhere first has to be designed. And we now also know the difference between, like a really well-designed button, for example, that just has, that gets people to push it, or a not so well-designed button. And the same, while we can measure that obviously with, the retail giants, etc., and you can equate that to a euro or dollar figure, but the same goes for processes in civic centers or wherever. If you design it well, the processes and the end goal, for Amazon selling stuff for the city of Barnsley, maybe not wasting taxpayers' money in issuing parking permits or whatever it might be. Those things, if they're well designed, they will also work better, just like they do for Amazon. And having this mind frame of, I guess adding real value with design, I think it's quite exciting because it's the awareness is much bigger now than it has been just a few years ago, because of the heightened experiences everybody has made with this. And anyway, I'm quite excited about that.
Yeah, that sounds, me too. We've got to take all those learnings from Amazon and Google and all the algorithms and get them so we can start making sure that, that my tax bill gets paid more efficiently than it used to.
For example, exactly.
So it'd be nice now if we could just get to know you a little bit better by asking you our first date questions. I don't know if you'd be up for that.
First dates, always can't remember, but go for it.
Great. Hopefully it'll be as awkward as first date.
My internet might cut out. You never know. Sketchy engine.
Well, yeah, I can see your finger hovering over the internet cutout button. Okay. So, what's been your best tech purchase of the last 12 months?
Okay. Might have two. They're not that exciting, I'll say, but they are. One is.
We find them. We always find them exciting.
Okay, so I bought. I guess they're called smart thermostats. That essentially the thing you turn your heating up and down with. And we live in a really old apartment, and it's. Anyway, there's nothing smart built into it. We barely have mobile reception there. So we've been away, we've been at my parents', or we've been in the mountains for the weekend and so on. And with these smart thermostats, you can just literally do it yourself, bolt them onto even a really ancient heater, and connect them to your modem. And then via an app, you can basically turn the heating on and off. And you can see how hot it is, and it's they cost $50 or so. It's such an easy purchase. They took 10 minutes to install. There was no hassle. It was so cool. And I thought smart home was going to be really complicated and take forever, but it was brilliant. And even in an old apartment like ours, now I can sort of go away if we go away for a week and turn the heating down, and a day before we come back and turn back up. It's pretty cool.
It's one of those things that, like, superficially you think that sounds really mundane, but when you're actually doing it, it's so exciting. So you're like, you know what? I wonder what the temperature is back at home. Oh, it's a bit too hot.
I haven't used it like this, but more when we went away. It was because it was freezing. We had like minus 20 or so in the winter for a few days, and it was kind of handy. So I told you, not that exciting, but it made my life better.
Hey, that's exciting. Yeah. So Do you remember what your first computer was? Stroke games console?
I don't think I ever
Did you
owned
ever-
a games
yeah.
console, but I had, I think it was the Macintosh 2 something. That was my first computer, like a big grey
Right.
block with a Macintosh
Yeah.
kind of square screen, not the classic. It was like a separate unit.
No.
I think, I can't remember. I think it was like, what were they? 20 megabyte hard drive or something like this. I can't quite remember.
Well, if your first computer had a hard drive, that's still pretty good, you know. That's quite that's quite far ahead.
It was second hand as well. Bought it
Did you?
as a student. Yeah,
Right,
I did
you
not
didn't build it
myself,
yourself.
no.
Not this time. Do you remember? Did you ever play any games when you were growing up? Did you remember what your first computer game was, or was there a computer game that really captured your attention as you were growing up?
Not that much. I had a friend who had a Commodore 64, and I think it was all,
Nice.
I mean, with a tape, whatever you call that, you know, the
They're cool.
tape thingy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we played, I think my favorite was Olympic Games, I think it was called. Yeah, that's right.
Fingers
And
going.
they had surfing. I think it was in Olympic Games. They had surfing. I'm pretty sure, and it was actually really cool. I really enjoyed it, and you could do so. This would have been, it might have been 10 or 11, so like mid 80s. But you could actually, I mean, you were surfing like a massive wave, and you could in 1986 or 7, you could. Like do your 360s and jumps, even with a keyboard control. So it was pretty, and in that I remember then that seemed like, I mean, no one could ever do that. Only in a computer game, of course. And now that's all reality. It's quite funny.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the best thing with those is like in your imagination and your memory, like the sort of the resolution of it is so much different if you actually played the game again. Like,
it looks like Minecraft now.
In your mind, it was like, oh, it's so amazing. Yeah. So, are you a surfer? I mean, what do you do to unwind and relax?
I lived in Australia for quite a while, so I surfed a lot there, and it was an important thing. So I used to skateboard. When I was a carpenter, I was more into the gritty stuff. I still skateboard. Actually, my 10-year-old son got me back into it. So we go to like a soft skate park where there's hardly any hard edges, all sort of soft and round, and it's kind of for little kids and old men.
Hardly any, but you can still find that one.
You can, yes, yeah. And I start shaking when I come near it. I get so scared. But no broken bones so far. So we do that. In the city, it's mainly then skateboarding. I run a fair bit, and Munich is close to the mountains, so we rent like a little hut in the mountains. So we spend probably every second weekend at least there. And then I do whatever goes, like running in the mountains, climbing, mountain biking, just walking a little bit and lying in the grass. It's also quite good.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Then just a few more. What item of technology would you put into room 202? So you remember the book 1984 where they put things into room 101? Well, here at Concise Conversations, we've got a worse room called room 202. So what item of tech would you put into room 202?
Ooh, okay. Very good question. Item of tech. Probably the Munich ticket machines for the public transport.
Are they even classed as technology?
That's a good question. Yeah, maybe it's just mechanics. Actually, that's It's
that's a good one.
It's I mean, the amount of tourists that stand in front of these machines, and you can see that they're sort of like gritting their teeth and going like, "Oh, what do these Germans want me to do? I cannot sit." It is so difficult, and it's almost like they really try to make it impossible for you to buy the right ticket before that train actually departs. You thought you had enough time because you arrived, early, and you had 5 minutes just to buy a ticket, but 5 minutes is probably not enough to figure out what ticket you need. So I would definitely put those in there.
But then, and there's always that, well, as a tourist in Germany, you always get there and, you know, you've got some euros, and then you get to the machine and it doesn't take notes, and then there's nowhere to get some change, so then you've got to get on the actual, I've got to get into the city, and then you get on, and then there's the awkward conversation with the conductor, and you're like, no, I'm from Britain, I didn't know how it works. Oh, that's a good one. They've got to go into room two,
definitely.
Yeah. Do you still make any carpentry in your spare time? When was the last time you got a bit of wood out?
Not so long ago. In our hut, I built some shelves. It's not very exciting. That doesn't really count
smart shelves?
Not really, no. But we do have smart thermostats. It's not smart thermostats.
Yeah.
That's so good. I built shelves there. What else did I build? I built not so long ago, a few years ago, I built a solid wood table for an artist. That was actually really good. We did a barter deal where he asked me. He's actually a fairly well-respected artist, and as many artists, he's very cautious with how much he sells, not to, deflate the value of his work, because his work is relatively pricey, I think now, and I really liked his work anyway, regardless. And we talked a lot, and he said, "Hey, maybe you could build me a table because you seem to understand what I want." And then I ended up building him a solid wood table that had to fit a very particular room, and it had to be of particular dimensions and have particular features built into it. And he gave me one of his paintings. Or in fact, it's a series they're prints from him, but made by him. Screen prints, there's 7 of them, I think. So that was probably one of the most memorable pieces of work that I've done. Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, that's good. And then finally, this is what we always find the most important question to ask someone. You can learn a lot about someone from this question. And what's your favorite keyboard shortcut?
I've got a new one. I think up until recently, it might have been Option Command C, and then Option Command V. So copy paste style formatting. That's very nice. But I have a new one which is Command double C.
Command double C, right.
Do you know this one?
No, got to learn this one.
Okay, it only works when you have a little application called DeepL installed.
It sounds exciting as well. This is good.
It's like, okay, there's like smart thermostats, and then there's DeepL. That's another level. DeepL is very handy if you work in 2 languages a lot. So we work in English and German practically all the time, and it's sometimes, for maybe things that, you need to translate long pieces of text, or you get something from a client and you just want to give them an idea what it might be like in English without actually typing it out. DeepL is a translation software, and you can install it. And then the cool thing is there's a shortcut which will automatically take whatever text you've selected, open it up in DeepL, translate it, and then you can just hit one button and it will insert in the same formatting the translated text.
That is a good keyboard
sold
shortcut.
You on that, huh? Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, like and now when I have to translate, you have sort of 3 pages, and you don't need to do an exact translation. You just need to do a sort of approximation. And you go, nightmare. And it just makes the impact on your life with this little shortcut. Yeah. It's good actually, because they own. Look at me, like I'm a total brand advocate, because they own that little experience of. I just translated 3 pages in 20 seconds. And
that freed up your time to come and have a conversation with us. That's brilliant. Exactly. So we need to thank DeepL as well. No, that's brilliant. Thanks a lot for your time. I've really enjoyed talking to you, and it's always good to get different perspectives, because we're a bit more techie based, but it's the same concepts of clients and trying to find pain points and then solving those pain points and just coming at it from a different angle. So it's always great to get someone else's perspective who's doing something similar. So thanks for your time, and if you do send us through your mood board, then anybody who's watching will run that now. But Thanks for your time, and
No
it's been
worries.
great speaking to you.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Robert.